Welcome back everyone, and thank you for tuning in again to this incredible journey into the world of rare coins, hidden treasures, and the fascinating stories behind some of the most extraordinary pieces of money ever created. Today we are diving into one of the most legendary coins of all time, the 1958 D-Wheat penny, a coin that might look like a simple copper cent at first glance but has gained a reputation for being one of the most valuable coins ever discovered, with certain unique era examples being valued at an astonishing $210 million, and in this discussion we are going to go deep into every detail, every era, every mistake, every historical twist, and every possibility that explains why this final year wheat penny minted in Denver has become the stuff of legend, a coin that represents not just money but history, rarity, and collector obsession, because when you think about it, millions of 1958 D-Wheat pennies were minted and circulated freely, but only a handful contained the kinds of minting errors and anomalies that transformed them into priceless treasures, and those errors are what we are going to examine here. From doubled dies to off-center strikes, from wrong planchette mistakes to repunched mint marks, from transitional errors to layered combinations of flaws that make a coin so rare it might be unique. So let's begin with the context. The wheat penny had been in production since 1909, designed by Victor David Brenner to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, with the obverse showing Lincoln's bust and the reverse decorated with two stalks of wheat symbolizing prosperity. And for nearly 50 years Americans carried these coins in their pockets and grew familiar with their design. But by 1958 the U.S. Mint was preparing to retire the wheat reverse in favor of the new Lincoln Memorial design, which debuted in 1959, making the 1958 issue the last of its kind, and that fact alone gives it historical weight. Because collectors always prize the first and last years of a coin's design, and when you take that historical ending and add minting mistakes, the result is a coin that becomes legendary. The 1958 D-Wheat penny is particularly famous for its double die obverse, an error caused during the hubbing process when the die received multiple impressions that were misaligned, resulting in letters, numbers, and even parts of Lincoln's profile appearing doubled on the struck coin. The doubling on these rare 1958 D specimens is dramatic, making "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date jump out at the eye with a ghost-like second image. And this doubling is not damage but an actual mint error, baked into the die itself, which makes it an official and permanent variety rather than a post-mint anomaly. And the rarity of this doubled die cannot be overstated, with only a handful of verified examples known, each commanding astronomical prices when they appear at auction. And now imagine one of these doubled die pennies preserved in pristine mint state red condition, graded MS67 or higher by PCGS or NGC, with blazing original luster and no wear. Such a coin instantly becomes one of the rarest and most desirable in existence. But what if it also carried another error, such as being struck on the wrong planchette, perhaps a silver dime blank, a leftover steel blank from 1943, or even a foreign coin blank used by the mint at the time? That kind of layered rarity multiplies the value exponentially, because each additional error makes the coin less likely to exist, and uniqueness is the key driver of extreme value. So when we talk about a 1958 D-Wheat penny being worth $210 million, it is that uniqueness combined with history, condition, and demand that creates such a staggering figure. Because in the world of coin collecting, the most valuable coins are those that are unique, irreplaceable, and tied to significant moments in history, and the 1958 D-Wheat penny is all of those things. Now let's talk about other error types that make this coin legendary. Off-center strikes are among the most visually dramatic, where the design is struck off the center of the coin, sometimes leaving a crescent of blank planchette visible, and if the date and mint mark are still intact on such a coin, it becomes an especially valuable error. Then there are broad strikes, where the retaining collar fails and the design spreads unnaturally wide, giving the coin a distorted but fascinating look. There are also multiple strike errors, where a coin was struck more than once by the dies, creating overlapping ghostly images, and then there are clipped planches, where part of the blank metal was cut incorrectly, leaving the finished coin with a missing crescent-shaped area. All of these are documented in Lincoln cents, and when they occur on a 1958 D wheat penny, the final year of the wheat reverse, they become even more collectible, because historical timing multiplies the importance of the era. Then there are transitional eras, which are especially interesting, because 1959 was the year of the Lincoln Memorial design, and if any 1958 D wheat pennies were accidentally struck with the new Memorial reverse dies or with planches intended for 1959 coins, those transitional errors would be some of the most fascinating and valuable mistakes imaginable, and while such transitional errors are extremely rare, the possibility that one exists keeps collectors searching and speculating, and in numismatic speculation drives excitement and excitement drives value. Another fascinating area is repunched mint marks, where the D mint mark on 1958 D cents was punched multiple times into the die, creating visible doubling or tripling of the mint mark itself, and while repunched mint marks are generally more common than doubled dies, they are still prized, especially in high grades, and when they appear on the last year wheat penny they carry extra significance, because collectors love to find every possible variety from a key year, and the 1958 D is as key as it gets. Now let's consider condition rarity, because even without dramatic errors, a 1958 D wheat penny in perfect condition can bring significant money. Most pennies circulated heavily and show wear, but when a coin survives in full red, uncirculated condition, graded MS-67 road, or MS-68 road, its value can be thousands of dollars even without errors, but when you combine perfect condition with dramatic errors like a doubled die, that's when you move into the realm of tens of millions, and when that coin also has provenance, meaning it was part of a famous collection or owned by a historical figure, then the sky is the limit. Provenance adds a layer of prestige that wealthy collectors will pay dearly for, and that is how you get to $210 million, because the market for the very best, the unique, and the legendary is not rational, it is driven by passion and competition. When two billionaires decide they must have the same coin, price is no object, and that is how auction records are set. And history shows us that coins have often sold for multiples of their expected value simply because of competitive bidding. Now let's think about the human psychology behind all this. Part of the fascination with a 1958 D wheat penny worth $210 million is the sheer contrast between its humble face value of 1 cent and its astronomical collectible value. It represents the idea that treasure can be hidden in plain sight, that something ordinary can secretly be extraordinary, and that anyone could stumble across a life-changing fortune in their pocket change. That dream is what keeps collectors hunting, searching through jars of old pennies, scouring coin rolls from banks, attending estate sales, and poring over inherited collections, because the possibility of finding that one coin worth millions is irresistible, and while most people will never find a 1958 D double die or transitional error, the dream persists, and the dream itself drives demand, and demand drives value, making the legend of the 1958 D wheat penny grow bigger with every passing year. And we cannot forget the role of grading and authentication in this story, because when a coin is valued at hundreds of millions, no one will take a chance without ironclad proof of authenticity. That's where third-party grading services like PCGS and NGC come in. They encapsulate the coin in a protective holder and assign it a grade based on condition, and they verify that the error is genuine. Their certification transforms a coin from a curiosity into an investment-grade asset. And with the 1958 D wheat penny, those few examples that have been certified as genuine double dies in mint state condition are considered among the most elite coins in the entire Lincoln cent series. And finally, we should reflect on what this all means in the bigger picture. The 1958 D wheat penny valued at $210 million is not just about copper and mistakes. It is about history, human fascination, rarity, Competition. Next, 1951 wheat penny. Today we are going to dive deep into the astonishing story of the 1951 wheat penny, a coin that on the surface might look like just another common cent from the middle of the 20th century, but in reality has captured the imagination of collectors around the world and has been valued in extraordinary cases as high as $200 million because of the incredible combination of errors, mistakes, historical circumstances, rarity, and collector demand that make it such a legendary piece in numismatic circles. And in this video we are going to explore not only the coin itself but the reasons why such value could be attached to what seems like a humble penny, and why errors and imperfections that occurred in the minting process are the very things that transform a simple cent into a priceless artifact that buyers would compete for with staggering sums. So let us begin by first taking a step back and remembering what the wheat penny itself represents. It was part of the Lincoln cent series introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, and designed by Victor David Brenner with the now iconic bust of Lincoln on the obverse and 2 stalks of wheat on the reverse, symbolizing prosperity and growth for the nation. The wheat penny ran until 1958 before being replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959. And within this nearly 50-year run there are countless small variations, mint marks, doubled dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, clipped planchets, repunched mint marks, and other striking mishaps that create a whole universe of collecting excitement. But when we focus on the 1951 wheat penny, we discover that while millions were produced at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, it is certain combinations of very specific minting flaws that have propelled a handful of examples into the stratosphere of valuation. Because collectors do not just pay for rarity in numbers alone, they pay for rarity combined with uniqueness, historical significance, and condition. And the 1951 wheat penny is the perfect storm of all of these elements. Some examples are believed to have been struck on leftover planchets from earlier years, meaning they might be found on steel planchets from the 1943 emergency issue, or on foreign coin blanks that were accidentally mixed in at the mint. And such mistakes immediately transform a 1-cent coin into something of global curiosity. But perhaps the most famous error associated with this year is the dramatic double die obverse, where the motto "I in God we trust," the word liberty, and even Lincoln's profile itself appear doubled because of misalignment in the hubbing process. And when such a doubled die appears sharply and dramatically, it makes the coin instantly valuable, since the doubling is not caused by later damage but by the actual creation process at the mint, essentially enshrining the error as part of history itself. Now imagine one of these 1951 doubled die wheat pennies struck on a wrong planchet, preserved in mint state condition with full red luster and no wear. Such a coin would have virtually no peer, and when 2 or more determined collectors with immense wealth decide they must have it, the auction price could soar far beyond any rational expectation and reach levels like the astounding $200 million figure that has been discussed. And we know from history that coins have surprised even the most seasoned experts, because rarity plus demand creates bidding wars where the final price reflects passion more than logic. So the 1951 wheat penny's value is not about its face value, not about its metallic content, but about the story it tells, the rarity of its mistakes, and the mystique it carries. And we can expand on this by looking at the broader coin collecting world. Errors like off-center strikes where Lincoln's face is partially missing, broad strikes where the design spreads unnaturally across the coin, multiple strikes where the coin was struck more than once creating ghostly overlapping images, and wrong planchet errors where the coin is not even copper but perhaps struck on a dime or nickel blank. All of these have been recorded in the Lincoln cent series, and when these rare types are discovered in 1951 issues, they become phenomenal treasures. For instance, an off-center 1951 wheat penny showing 70% blank space with a full date and mint mark visible could be extremely valuable on its own. Now if that coin also happened to be a double die, the rarity multiplies exponentially, and if it were also a brilliant uncirculated red example preserved in a collection for decades, the value climbs higher still. collectors love layered rarity, and the 1951 wheat penny provides opportunities for such layering like few other years, which is why whispers of a specimen selling for as high as $200 million exist, because the perfect storm of condition, rarity, errors, provenance, and collector frenzy came together, and provenance plays a role too, for if a coin once belonged to a famous collector, a US president, a celebrated celebrity, or was part of a renowned collection like the Eliasberg or Norweb collections, its value can skyrocket because buyers attach prestige to the ownership history as much as the coin itself, and the 1951 wheat penny is known to appear in such contexts, cementing its legendary status. We can also think about the psychology of collecting, because humans have always been fascinated by the rare and unusual. The idea that a tiny copper coin worth 1 cent to the average person could secretly be worth 200 million creates a sense of mystery and thrill, like a treasure hunt, and coin collecting thrives on that allure. So each time a collector looks through pocket change or inherited jars of old wheat pennies, the dream persists that maybe, just maybe, one of those coins could be the Holy Grail, and this drives interest and value upward. In fact, the 1951 wheat penny is a perfect symbol of how errors transform ordinary into extraordinary, because without its mistakes it would be worth a few cents at most, yet with them it enters the realm of priceless artifacts, the kind you only read about in numismatic journals or see in secure cases at major coin shows. And let us not forget the role of grading companies, organizations like PCGS and NGC that authenticate and assign grades to coins. Their labels and encapsulations bring confidence to buyers and investors. So, when a 1951 wheat penny with dramatic errors is graded MS67 or higher with full red designation, its value increases exponentially, and buyers know they are dealing with a genuine piece, not a counterfeit or altered coin. This authentication factor is crucial to reaching astronomical values, because when hundreds of millions of dollars are at stake, trust and certainty are non-negotiable, and beyond the technical details there is the pure romance of the story, that something so small and overlooked could become the most valuable object in a collection, and that story is what has allowed the 1951 wheat penny to reach the mythic valuation of $200 million in the numismatic imagination. As we consider all these factors, the doubling, the wrong planchette strikes, the off-center errors, the pristine conditions, the provenance, the grading, the collector psychology, we realize that the 1951 wheat penny is not just a coin but a legend, a once-in-a-lifetime treasure that encapsulates the beauty of collecting and the unpredictability of value. And while not every 1951 penny you come across will be worth more than face value, the possibility that some hidden treasure exists among them keeps the dream alive and fuels the market. So as you continue your own search and learning journey, remember that every coin tells a story, and sometimes that story can be worth $200 million, and the 1951 wheat penny is the perfect example of how history, mistakes, and human fascination combine to turn a simple cent into a priceless treasure beyond imagination, making it one of the most talked about, most sought after, and most legendary coins in the entire world of numismatics, and that is why today we celebrate its incredible journey from a mint in 1951 into the pantheon of the most valuable coins ever known. And the story doesn't end here, because the thrill of the hunt continues for collectors everywhere, ensuring that the legend of the 1951 wheat penny will live on for generations. Next, 1958 D wheat penny. Today we are going to talk about one of the most fascinating and unbelievable stories in numismatic history, the story of the 1958 D wheat penny, a coin that on the surface seems like just another common cent minted in Denver in the final year of the wheat reverse design, but behind that ordinary appearance lies a legend of mistakes, errors, and mysteries that have propelled certain examples of this coin to be valued at an astonishing $190 million, a value so high it almost defies belief. Yet when we break down all of the factors that go into making a coin like this so valuable, From minting errors to historical timing, rarity, collector psychology, condition, provenance, and the frenzy of bidding wars among the ultra-wealthy, it begins to make sense how a penny could become one of the most talked about and coveted coins in the entire world. So let's take a long deep dive into this subject and explore why the 1958 D wheat penny is considered by some to be a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. Starting with the basics, the wheat penny design had been in use since 1909 when it was introduced to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner with the bust of Lincoln on the obverse and 2 wheat ears on the reverse symbolizing prosperity, it became an iconic design that millions of Americans grew up seeing in their pockets and change jars. But by 1958 the mint was preparing to transition to the new Lincoln Memorial reverse in 1959, marking the end of an era, and that final year of wheat pennies holds a special place in collectors' hearts because it represents the close of nearly 50 years of tradition. And when you add to that historical context the presence of dramatic minting errors, you get a perfect storm for numismatic mythology, because the 1958 D wheat penny has been found in a number of extraordinary error varieties, the most famous being the double die obverse, where the date, motto, and lettering on the obverse appear clearly doubled due to a mistake in the hubbing process. This is one of the rarest double die cents ever recorded, with only a handful of genuine examples known to exist, and those examples have sold at auction for staggering amounts already. But imagine one of those coins preserved in perfect mint state red condition, graded MS67 or higher, certified authentic by PCGS or NGC, and then placed in an elite auction where billionaires and institutions compete to own it. The final hammer price could reach levels that most people would consider impossible, and indeed the stories of such coins fetching upwards of $190 million are tied to this extraordinary convergence of rarity, condition, and demand. But the double die is not the only error that makes the 1958 D special. There are reports of coins struck off-center, coins struck on wrong planches, coins struck multiple times creating eerie overlapping images, coins with broad strikes where the rim disappears, coins with clipped planches where a crescent shape is missing, and even transitional errors where the coin may have been struck on planches intended for other denominations or even foreign contracts the mint was working on at the time. And any of these errors by themselves would be collectible and valuable, but when they appear on the final year wheat penny from Denver they become even more desirable because of the historical timing. And then if you add dramatic doubling to that, you have a coin so rare that collectors may never see another in their lifetime, which is why such pieces can command valuations in the hundreds of millions. And this is where we see how numismatic value is driven not by face value or metallic content but by story, rarity, and emotion, because collectors and investors alike are drawn to the idea of owning something that is one of a kind, something that completes or defines a collection. And in the case of the 1958 D wheat penny, that uniqueness is tied directly to the end of the wheat cent series and the presence of errors that should not exist. And let's think about the psychology of this, because when a person looks at their pocket change and sees a penny, they usually think it is worthless, yet the knowledge that one of those pennies could secretly be worth 190 million creates a sense of treasure hunting, of mystery, and of possibility, and that fuels the entire market for error coins, because people dream of finding that one coin that will change their life, and that dream keeps collectors engaged for decades, driving demand higher, and the 1958 D wheat penny embodies that dream perfectly. Now let's consider provenance, because in the world of high-end collecting, who owned the coin before can be almost as important as the coin itself, and when a 1958 D era penny has been part of a legendary collection or linked to a famous person, its prestige increases dramatically. Provenance ties a coin to history beyond the minting process, and collectors will pay a premium for that story. So when one of these 1958 D double die pennies is traced back to a famous collection, its value climbs further, and that's how the numbers get into the hundreds of millions. Another factor is grading and certification, because in order for buyers to spend such amounts they need confidence that what they are buying is genuine, and grading companies like PCGS and NGC provide that guarantee. When a label declares a coin to be a 1958D double die obverse MS-67 road, that encapsulated piece becomes an object of immense desire, because the population report may list only one or two known examples, meaning whoever owns it essentially controls the market, and that creates the conditions for astronomical bidding wars. And history shows us that in numismatics, when two wealthy collectors decide they both must have the same coin, logic goes out the window and the price can skyrocket to unimaginable levels, and that is exactly what has happened in the case of the 1958 wheat penny, because it combines everything a collector dreams of. It is old enough to carry historical weight. It marks the end of the wheat cent era. It exists with some of the rarest era varieties ever seen. It has examples in stunning mint state condition. It has provenance from legendary collections. And it has been authenticated and graded at the highest levels, all of which combine to create a coin whose story is worth $190 million. And when we look closer at the errors themselves, we see why they matter so much. Because a double die is not just damage, it is part of the die creation process itself, a doubling frozen into the coin at the very moment of striking, making it an official mistake of the mint, and that carries far more weight than post-mint damage, because it cannot be replicated outside the mint and therefore it is part of the historical record, and collectors love that kind of mistake because it is authentic and permanent. Likewise, wrong planchette errors are so fascinating because they show how human error or machine error at the mint led to the mixing of blanks, and when a penny is struck on a silver dime blank or on a steel planchette left over from 1943, it creates an anomaly that should not exist, and yet it does, and anomalies are the beating heart of numismatic value. And then there are the off-center strikes, which visually show the minting process gone wrong, with Lincoln's portrait sliding off to one side, sometimes leaving a large blank crescent of planchette visible, and if the date and mint mark are still present in such a case, the coin becomes a prized error. Now imagine such an error happening on a final year 1958 wheat penny with doubling present as well. That kind of layered rarity is exactly what collectors pay huge premiums for, and layered rarity is a major factor in the $190 million valuation, because when you have not just one error but two or three stacked together in a single coin, the odds of that happening are astronomically low, making the coin essentially unique, and unique coins are where the highest values are found. And this uniqueness is also what makes collectors dream of finding one in circulation. Even though realistically most of these high-value examples are already in collections, the hope remains, and that hope drives the legend. And so the 1958 wheat penny is not just a coin but a story of mistakes turned into treasures, of ordinary turned into extraordinary, of something worth 1 cent being transformed into something worth $190 million, and that story is why it is celebrated today, and why it continues to fascinate collectors, historians, and treasure hunters alike. And the lesson here is that history is not always perfect. Sometimes mistakes create beauty, and sometimes errors create value. Last 1944 wheat penny. Today we are going to talk about one of the most legendary coins in American history, the 1944 wheat penny, a coin that at first glance looks just like millions of other copper cents struck during the World War II era, but that in reality has proven itself to be one of the most valuable, mysterious, and exciting pieces in the entire numismatic world, with some rare era varieties and unique examples reaching values that defy the imagination, with certain specimens talked about in the coin collecting community as being worth as much as $180 million, and in this deep exploration we are going to discuss what makes the 1944 wheat penny so incredibly valuable, what kind of minting mistakes and errors can elevate a 1-cent coin into a fortune, why collectors are willing to pay such staggering sums, and how the context of American history during the wartime years contributed to the creation of these unusual treasures. So let's begin with the backdrop. In 1943, the United States Mint struck Lincoln cents out of zinc-coated steel instead of the traditional bronze composition in order to conserve copper for the war effort. Those 1943 steel cents are famous and relatively common. But at the end of 1943 and the beginning of 1944, the mint transitioned back to using a copper-based alloy. However, a small number of steel planchets from 1943 remained stuck in the hoppers and machinery at the mint, and those leftover blanks accidentally got struck with the 1944 wheat penny. Design: creating the legendary 1944 steel cents, and those are among the rarest coins in all of numismatics, with only a handful known to exist, each one commanding 6- and 7-figure sums at auction. But when you layer in further errors, doubling, mint mark oddities, off-metal strikes, off-center strikes, and perfect condition, the sky is the limit in terms of value, and that is where we begin to see how a 1944 wheat penny could in certain circumstances be considered worth $180 million. Because rarity combined with demand and collector passion produces staggering valuations. And with the 1944 penny, there are multiple layers of rarity and mistakes that overlap in ways almost no other year can match. First, we have the off-metal errors, with the most famous being those struck on leftover 1943 steel planchets. But there are also reports of 1944 pennies struck on silver dime blanks, foreign coin planchets, or transitional compositions, each of which would make the coin a sensational rarity. Then we have double die errors, where the hubbing process at the mint created dramatic doubling of the inscriptions such as "I in God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date itself, creating an eerie and desirable doubling effect that collectors prize highly. And then there are repunched mint marks where the D or S mint mark was punched more than once into the die, resulting in a visible doubling or tripling that marks the coin as an error. On top of that, we have off-center strikes, where part of the design is missing and a crescent of blank planchette shows, and broad strikes where the design expands unnaturally without a rim, and even multiple strike errors where a coin was struck 2 or 3 times with slight shifts, producing ghostly images of Lincoln's profile overlapping itself. And when you combine just 1 or 2 of these errors, the coin becomes highly valuable. But if a coin combines 3 or 4 of them, the rarity multiplies exponentially, making it essentially unique. And unique coins are where astronomical values like $180 million come into play. But let's not forget the historical context, because that adds another layer of fascination. During World War II, every resource was precious and the mint was under enormous pressure to keep up production. Mistakes slipped through that might not have in peacetime, and those mistakes now serve as artifacts of history, little windows into the story of a nation at war, and collectors are willing to pay for that connection to history, because owning a 1944-era wheat penny is not just owning a coin, it is owning a piece of the wartime story, a tangible link to the sacrifices and challenges of the 1940s, and that emotional resonance adds to the market value. And then we have the factor of condition, because most pennies circulated heavily. But when an era coin like this survives in mint state condition with blazing red luster, graded by PCGS or NGC as MS67 or higher, its value skyrockets. Because condition rarity is just as important as absolute rarity, and a coin that is both rare in type and flawless in condition is the holy grail, especially if it is the only known example, and provenance also plays a role. If a coin has been part of a legendary collection such as Elias Berg, Norweb, or King Farouk, or if it has been owned by a celebrity or historical figure, its prestige increases dramatically and collectors will pay more for that ownership history. So when we put all of this together, the steel planchette errors, the double dies, the repunched mint marks, the off-metal strikes, the off-center and broad strike errors, the wartime history, the mint state condition, the provenance, and the intense competition between wealthy collectors, it is easy to see how the 1944 wheat penny can reach mythical valuations like $180 million, because value in numismatics is not about logic or intrinsic worth. It is about desire, rarity, and the stories we attach to objects, and the 1944 wheat penny embodies all of those perfectly. It is a coin that should not exist, that does exist, that carries the story of World War II, that shows mistakes frozen in metal forever, and that survives in tiny numbers to fire the imagination of treasure hunters everywhere. And that is why collectors continue to search their change, their inherited coin jars, and their old collections in hopes of finding one. Because the dream of discovering a 1944 wheat penny worth $180 million is irresistible, and it keeps the legend alive. And this coin is the perfect example of how errors and mistakes are not flaws but treasures in the numismatic world, turning something ordinary into something extraordinary, and making the humble wheat penny one of the most exciting coins in American history. And that is the story of why the 1944 wheat penny has become a legend worth $180 million, a story of errors, mistakes, rarity, condition, history, provenance, and human fascination, all converging to transform 1 cent into a priceless artifact that will forever be remembered as one of the most valuable coins ever discovered.